In talking about Paul Tillich, we had also been talking about some of his ideas, and also that there are harmonies of the Gospels, and that there are very good theological books on systematic theology, which is another important thing. Now, the interesting thing too about Paul Tillich is that he also wrote his own uh, systematic theology books, and in 3 volumes. And again, you will see in this very, very short list of what's in these books. It doesn't give, of course, any detail at all, but it'll give you an idea of one. In 1 volume, for example, the introduction, and then the first part is reason and revelation. The second part is being and God. Volume 2, the first part is existence and the Christ. And then in volume 3, life and the Spirit and history of the kingdom of God, and then an index. Now, it's double pages long. When you see it, it's not a single page, but it's a double page. And it's 475 pages, double page long. So that is an outline of his. Notice how he begins with reason and revelation, and then being and God. Those are both very deep subjects for Paul Tillich, because they take you to the idea of how the human mind works in reasoning, and how revelation works in reasoning, and then being and God. Is God being, or is God a being? There is a difference in Paul Tillich's idea of that. And then existence and the Christ. What does Christ have to do with existence? And what does existence have to do with Christ? And then life and the Spirit. How does the Spirit influence life? And how does life react to the Spirit, for example? The history in the kingdom of God. Now, all of that has to do with what kind of history there is, and which part of history leads to the kingdom of God and which does not. Another interesting thing about Paul Tillich, by the way, we will mention briefly on a YouTube lecture from Harvard Divinity School by Professor Richard Schacht. Fascinating talk on After the Death of God, Friedrich Nietzsche and Paul Tillich. Now that you would expect with Nietzsche, of course, who said God is dead, and Tillich, who was a theologian and psychologist, you would think they would be the absolute opposite from one another. But in this lecture, you see how Tillich respected Nietzsche, read a lot of Nietzsche, and thought there were many, many things that were both revealed through each of these people that were true and not false. He goes deeply into Nietzsche, Tillich does, and talks about that. And the lecturer quotes both from Tillich's own works and from Nietzsche's own works, and puts together this quite remarkable scheme of things. Now, if any of you know Friedrich Nietzsche, which I have known for a long time, I have many of his books, and I've always respected his writing, and many don't. And if you knew Paul Tillich, you would not expect any such thing as any relationship between the two. But there is, and it is quite fascinating, something to listen to.